So now you've constructed and queried a map for both discrete objects and continuous objects. But there's also something else we want to say about these spatial semantic pointers, and that is that they're interesting to us not just because they are useful in this broader vector symbolic algebra, but also because they have a fundamental connection to representations of continuous spaces in the brain. And we're thinking specifically here about grid cells and place cells that are found in hippocampus and are implicated in organisms' ability to navigate spaces. We can construct a grid cell behavior by carefully choosing the axis vectors that make up our representations of the x and y coordinates that we saw earlier. Here we have an example of two grid cells, ones with different spatial resolutions, so a looser grid, a tighter grid. And what happens is that a neuron, a grid cell, fires with this predictable grid-like pattern as an animal navigates the domain. And by concatenating enough of these populations of grid cells together, we can represent a population of neurons whose activity encodes a particular point in space, so like a place cell here. This is an important part of why we're interested in this work. It's not just about abstract manipulations of arbitrary random vectors. It's about manipulations that are implementable by neurons of representations that we believe have some important connection with representations that we find in the brain. So SSPs are useful because they allow us to define concepts that are in continuous space, but also allow us to store objects in slots that are defined by continuous values, which means that we can have a sense of continuity between objects, which allows us to extend beyond the basic language-like representations that are fundamental to vector symbolic algebras. But also, we find that these representations are functionally affected and that they are a useful basis for function learning, and they also have a meaningful connection to neural representations. So, thank you, and we'll see you in the wrap-up.